When I talk about abolishing grading in school and in classrooms, I make the analogy that grades are our school's drug of choice, and there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us that are addicted to them, students and teachers and parents alike. The system itself is driven to distraction by tests and grades, and so when I talk about moving beyond grading and then leaving it behind. I like to use the analogy of detoxing students. So in my context, I taught mostly grade 8 students in a 6 to 8 school, middle school. So I taught the last grade level before kids would leave the school and go to grade 9 at the local high school. So some people will ask, how do children react to a gradeless learning environment if you don't have grades? A lot of these questions are very they're powerful questions. Things like, if you don't grade students, why would they do anything? Why would they learn? Or if you don't grade students, how do you put a mark on the report card, or how do you assess them if you don't grade them? These are all excellent questions, and I've written about them as well. But I want to stick with sort of the reaction. How do kids react? So when kids first come into my classroom and I don't have these grades here, I call this step one, which is about an intervention. I'm intervening with the children and their obsession with grades. So I take away the drug, the grades, and I talk about a little bit with the kids why I'm doing this, and I get a couple different reactions. The high achievers, the kids that are typically would get high grades and have been getting high grades for their first 8 years of schooling, they're more than a little suspicious because I'm taking away their high. I'm taking away their fix. Um, so when I they're suspicious. However, because quite often kids that get high marks are usually find a way to comply to a teacher's demands. That's a great way to get high marks. Um, they are suspicious, but they're more than willing to go along with it because I'm the teacher, and that's what they've always done. The average achievers are kind of ho hum, like, yeah, okay, sure, and they might be even a little interested because quite often those average achievers, um, schools become quite monotonous, and it's not necessarily the most interesting place to be. And all of a sudden, somebody's offering something different, and so there's some novelty to this. So the average students are thinking to themselves, "Let's give it a go." I mean, anything that might be different might mean it might be exciting. And then I get a very interesting reaction from the low achievers because quite often they tend to, when I announce that I'm no longer going to be grading, they tend to kind of fall over with something that half looks like exuberance and half looks like exhaustion. They're just glad that the beatings are finally coming to an end. They're for most of their schooling career, schools become this place they go to be told that they're not very good at anything. And so because I'm taking away the club that they've been hit over the head with more times than their fair share, yeah, they're pretty happy to hear it, even if they don't know exactly what it means. Step two is kind of a honeymoon sobriety, away from the drug of choice here, the grades. The honeymoon sobriety is that when you first move away from grading, kind of the immediate reaction often is quite the kids are like, they stop talking about them, and if you want to start focusing on learning, quite often the kids will focus on the learning, and I found it to be refreshing. After that short honeymoon sobriety, though, the shakes tend to come back they break out with no warning, where all of a sudden a lot of the high achievers will start coming to the teacher, to me, and saying, grade me, assess me, mark me, damn it, I need to know what I am. Alfie Kohn calls this sort of an existential vertigo, where kids fall into the trap of saying, who am I if not a B minus? And it's your job to assess me. I've had a number of kids where I do remember this. I remember Rachel one time. She came to me and said, "You know, I see what you're doing here, Mr. Bauer. You want me to be a part of reflecting on my own learning. You want me to play an active part in figuring out how well I'm doing." And then I kind of said, "Yeah, that's it." And I was pretty excited because she was getting it. And then she looked me in the eye and says, "Yeah, but I don't want to do that. It's more work." And so, if for children who, or for learners who are not used to reflecting and taking some ownership, it can be very intimidating. And I argue actually, and I don't like the word rigor. I prefer the word vigor. And I think that when you do self-assessment correctly, it is more vigorous. Um, for the kids because it does take a lot of effort to do it right. Um, Stage four is some sustained sobriety. When I work with the kids and I talk quite a bit about why we've moved away from grading, and so we talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and some of the science behind it, and it becomes some of the lessons themselves on why I'm doing what I'm doing as the classroom teacher. And the kids move away from their grade dependency for an extended amount of time. So I would typically see kids for 10 months of the year. Once they got into the sustained sobriety, we just focused on learning, and it was really cool because I no longer ever had to answer the questions: Is this for marks? Does this count? What's this out of? If I don't do this, how will it affect my report card? I didn't have to have kids coming up to me and asking these questions, and they no longer started to do this mental math of cost benefit analysis. You know, if I don't do this, I'll still pass, and that's okay. The point is that they're not learning, though. And that can't be okay. And that's why grades are so distracting. There's a huge difference between somebody who is, you know, trying to be successful grade wise and having high achievement versus somebody who's actually learning a lot. They're not the same thing. Step five is kind of this towards the end of my 10 months time with the kids, and they see high school on the horizon. They fall off the bandwagon. And over the years, I've prepared for this. I know it's inevitably going to happen. So the kids require some guidance in what's high school going to be like. And I'm honest with them. There's a very good chance they're not going to experience a teacher in high school who outright, abolishes grading, other than the school district's mandated report card. They are likely to experience grading more like how they had in their previous 7 years of education than with me. So we talk about that, and what I find is that um, when they come back to me in step six, which is the mindful reflection stage, many of the kids who end up going to high school, they have excellent teachers at high school who still might grade them, but they come back and say, that time that I spent in your classroom without those grades was an important part of my education because it allowed me to find or look at learning in a different way rather than seeing it as this chore that I just had to be done with and or always selecting the easiest tasks in order to guarantee my most successful grade. Instead of all that, the kids would say to me that they had a chance to look at real learning and find a passion for learning and find out what part of learning really greased their gears and blowed their hair back, and it gave them a chance to see learning through a different lens. And so this is my answer to a lot of people who might say, well, isn't taking grading away from kids for 1 year setting them up for some sort of failure if then they go to high school and they then experience learning with grades again? And the answer is no, it's not at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It might be counterintuitive, but it is quite the opposite. Kids who experience learning even for a short period without having the carrot or stick of grades dangling over them, either coercing them with threats or coercing them with bribes, they are better off because they get a chance to see learning for what it truly is, and that is this thing that you should want to do for its own sake. Uh, and it's until you experience it, until you abolish grading and you try teaching without grades for a while, and there will be setbacks for sure because the kids, they do have the shakes, they do go into withdrawal from going without grading. But when you see them and that light in their eyes when they're learning, not because they're forced to, but because they want to, it is very fulfilling as a teacher.